Hey, everybody, welcome to a brand new episode of the Hemmings Hot Rod Barbecue Podcast. On this episode, we have one of my favorite people, somebody that I've known for a long, long time, been in the business with forever, Zack Klapman of the Smoking Tire of Haggerty of Drive. Zack has been around doing this job for a long time. Knows a thing or two about cars. How you doing, buddy?
Great. I'm very good. Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me on your show.
Absolutely, dude. So how the hell have you been? You have been over the last, I want to say 5 years, kind of all over the place. You've done stuff with Haggerty. You've been, a co-host and producer of the Smoking Tire forever. You've been on the Drive Network, Drive with NBCSN. You do stand-up, podcasting, kind of like a jack of all trades when it comes to this automotive world.
Yeah, it's been really fun. I'm going to send that audio clip to my mom so that she's proud of me. I think what I've learned through all this is you have to have like a steady job somewhere and then grab other things when you can, or other opportunities when you can, and they present themselves. And I've been really fortunate in that all the, I guess, full-time, let's call it, bosses I've had since I started doing automotive stuff full time almost 10 years ago have given me that flexibility to go over here and make the show with Haggerty, or, fill in on Drive when there were slots open, or, do other side projects. I'm going to do stuff with the Autopian soon and do some videos with them and drive some of Bill Bachman's crazy stuff. And so that's going to happen in 2023. But, like Matt, the Smoking Tire, or my boss JF before that, they've all been very encouraging of helping me, do the things they know I want to do. And it's been really fun. A lot of shocking opportunities, I'd say, in the last couple of years.
So you're one of the few out there. I mean, I've done it, Farrah's done it, a bunch of us have done it, that actually reviews privately owned cars. Mm-hmm. Right? You go out. We used to call it, when we used to do Big Muscle back in the day, bring a stranger to work day.
Yeah.
And you have a very kind of unique take on when you drive other people's cars. You're never critical, but you're always honest, and you're always forthcoming about not only what the car does, but it seems like you're very good at reading into why the automobile was built, right? And then it's like you almost review it based upon how they see it in their eyes, with a little of Zack Klapman flavor thrown in to keep it honest. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I really appreciate that. That's for that being recognized, because it's the challenge with driving a private person's car is they're not a faceless company. Like if we drive a brand new Chevy, Ford, Porsche, whatever,
sure,
we can be, there's some objectivity to reviewing a car and there's some subjectivity, but it's very easy to criticize the company because you're not speaking directly to the engineer and about the decision they made. But with the private person's car, I mean, sometimes they're sitting in the car with me while I'm reviewing it. And so
right.
It can be, I think I try to frame it. I try to understand why they got the car in the first place. Why do they love the car? And why have they made the choices they made? In terms of modification, and that helps inform me how critical I want to be about it. So sometimes someone will say, hey, I'm trying to make this into a really good track canyon car. And people are very good about being upfront about saying, hey, let me know what you think. And so then I know, okay, well, that door's open for me to be critical in a constructive way. So for example, I drove this amazing Mitsubishi Eclipse a couple of months ago. And I mean, the story of the car was incredible. The guy got it when he was like 17. It was a front wheel drive GS, non-turbo, and he has converted it using parts from four different generations of Evo, I should say, into an all-wheel drive turbocharged, GSX. Yeah. So that story to me, like right out of the gate, I'm like, well, this is amazing. I mean, there's nothing I can say that will undo the joy he feels with this car. And honestly, the joy I felt when he told me the story, but it was too low. So it rubbed in every corner, almost regardless of speed. So parked, it looked awesome. On a slow driving on a smooth road. Yes, it does look really good. But if I was like, hey man, Miguel, if you want to drive this car aggressively in the canyons, which this could do very well, it needs these changes made. So it's like, if your intent with the car is to just win at car shows and have it look a certain way. Because I know there are people that go into building a car purely for aesthetic reasons, like the stance folks. I used to really be a little bit harsh to them because I didn't understand why they were compromising the abilities of their car. But I've talked to people that say they live in LA and they've never driven in the canyons before. Like the canyons are right there, but it's not in their community. It's not in their interest. So for them, it's like, well, I'm building a car to win the car show or to look cool or because I simply like the style of it. And I think it's like, you know, who am I to tell this person that their subjective taste is wrong? Because they're not saying my car is the fastest thing on a racetrack. They're saying, I like this. I'm like, well, I can't argue with you. So I'm not gonna. Yeah.
Right. Do they ever, so when you do a TST episode, right, and you're up in the canyons, will you tell them, be like, listen, this is what I'm going to do? Obviously the canyons are the canyons, right? We've got some wonderful sweepers, we've got some tight stuff, up and down hills. It's really going to test the car. Do you talk to them about how hard you're going to drive it? Will you ask them, say, okay, can I drive this at 6/10? Can I drive this at 7/10, 10/10? Like where are you comfortable with? And what is the response from most of the owners?
I'm usually, it comes up in conversation almost every time. I just say, hey, look, I'm not trying to win today. I'm not trying to test the handling limits. I think I usually drive 7/10 or something like that if we had to, you know, ballpark it. And I haven't had anyone push back against that. I've had comments from people, usually when they see the video or when they see the drive-bys or when I drive past them, that is like, you know, wow, you drive quicker than I do. But I want to explain to the audience that it's always said as almost a term of endearment, because for a lot of these folks, this car is so precious to them that they don't drive it very hard. And it's not that I'm being abusive to the car. It's like they realize they're under driving it, or they're excited to see the car go by. So again, this Eclipse, the thing makes amazing power and it handled very well with the rubbing aside. And he had never let anyone else drive the car before. And I know that's something you and I encountered with Big Muscle before.
Oh,
So up front, I just say like, look, I'm not going to drift. I'm not doing burnouts. Like I'm not here to damage your car or test its limits. You know, I'm going to be driving it quickly because that helps me assess braking performance. And it's a little bit more exciting for the video. But I definitely check with them beforehand. And if there are any issues with it that they mention ahead of time, like I will be careful with those, because I'm not trying to break someone's car, make them feel uncomfortable, or put myself or somebody else at risk. Yeah.
So are you ever, because I was always but enamored with the ingenuity of people. This GSX, perfect example of that, right? Converted it to all-wheel drive, you know, of how these people, and I want to say kids because I've gotten older, which is really annoying. But how these people kind of put these cars together, right? And then make this final product that you're like, Jesus, this is pretty amazing. Like, are you ever shocked at how much work they do and how the final product comes out?
Totally. I need to think of other examples, but the fact that this gentleman's car worked as advertised surprised me, because he does not have any technical training in automotive repair. He doesn't work at a fab shop. I mean, the complexity of this build for someone who doesn't work in that world was really almost inspiring and surprising. Because I've driven cars that were built by people that work at a speed shop. And so I expect their car to work really well. We have both had the experience where sometimes that's not true. Quality of speed shops is not always equal. But, you know, someone like this guy, Miguel, he has friends that are knowledgeable and they tinkered, and, you know, this project has been going on for a number of years. But pardon me, the fact that it started easily, it revved the way it's supposed to rev. It made good power. It turned off and on fine. The brakes worked well. The spring rates felt good. Like the fact that all that stuff felt fairly harmonious for something that was made from 5 different cars was really impressive. I've driven, this gentleman his name's Rob, this was years ago, and he had a 67 Chevelle, I believe, that was like a budget pro touring car. So it had the stock engine, but, you know, warmed over with intake and all the other stuff. and he'd put good brakes on it and some hotchkiss things and like, some mishmash parts, but it looked rough, meaning like it was whatever off-white paint. The hood was
Sure.
black. It didn't look like it was winning SEMA, but it ran great. It stopped fairly well. It handled very well considering what it was. I mean, it was kind of like a road course build that you'd expect almost in period. So stuff like that. And he just does it in his driveway. And again, he's not a trained technician or anything. So sometimes people show up with really complicated things that work, really, really well. And I am always so excited for them and like inspired that I could do more with my cars in my own hands if I just put in the effort, because these folks certainly did.
Well, that's a great point. I mean, I know, and I've said this a million times. I mean, I've broken more stuff than I've ever fixed, but I'm not afraid to go in and play with stuff. That said, you've done that. I mean, you have your E46 M3 that you bought, and I know that you've had some minor issues with that, but that you've always gone into it and kind of gotten your hands dirty to an extent, right?
I have, when I am like physically able or have the time for it. So I have a back injury, which has come and gone a lot. So recently my car, it needed a time cert put in the rear diff housing, which required pulling out the entire differential. And I just know, like, I was like, I can't do that. If I had a lift, if I didn't have a lift, like physically, I can't move a differential around or crawl under a car 14 times. So I had to pay, Mark Norris at Bavarian or Bavarian Workshop to take care of that. But, years ago, it needed new O2 sensors and some other stuff. And I had time, and I looked at it like I've been afraid to work on new cars for a long time because I grew up with a hot rod and I had to work on that, but it seems so much simpler compared to any modern thing. So I was kind of scared of the car for a while. And then I talked to a friend of mine. He's like, look, it's just the parts come apart and the parts go back together. Like, it's all machinery. So if you find good instructions and you follow them, like, it should work out. It should, you might find new problems, but if, you just baby steps. And so that kind of gave me the guts to do that. So if I have a problem that I research and go, I am capable of doing this with the tools I have in the space I have, then I've found it to be educational, and I'd like to do more of it because it's just, there's a great sense of accomplishment that comes from that stuff. Like, it feels great. And it's more fun to drive your car afterwards because you're like, I fixed that thing. And sure hope it sticks together. And then 6 months later, it's still working. You're like, I did it right.
That's right.
So I like it when I'm able to. I do like it.
How you've progressed, obviously, from driving privately owned cars to now driving some of the best cars on the planet, right? From different Porsches and different exotics and stuff like that. How is that been from a progression standpoint? Like, did you ever think you were like, I'm going to go test drive Porsches today, and I'm going to drive Ferraris today, and I'm going to do that? Like, did that 15 years ago, did that ever enter your mind that that's what you wanted to do, or that's what you would be doing as a career?
Kind of. It'll still sound weird. I didn't know it would work out, but when I moved here from Colorado, I wanted to be like, on a screen driving a car. I think I had a similar dream to every person on YouTube. It was like, you watch Top Gear and you go, that looks like all the fun in the world. I mean, why who wouldn't want to do that? They're sliding cars in the rain and they're making jokes. And so those are the things I wanted to do, but I didn't know it would work out because I had zero plan and zero contacts when I moved here. So it was very much a shot in the dark. And then if you have a goal and you start walking towards that goal, say yes to things that will seem like they'll lead you there, maybe, or and say no to things that definitely won't. And, I think it's a little bit of like, keep going and some luck and some skills you learn along the way. But it's still very surprising. Like, when we go on these, press trips or get to do really fun, exciting shoots, like, like being on, drive on NBC Sports, that was a huge thing. Like, that was a huge thing for me personally. And then doing Rated on Haggerty, I'm making jokes with Lee Keen and Dio Shihara and riding in a McLaren while Dio Shihara slides it around. It's like, what world is this? I mean, this Formula Drift driver is like showing me the ropes and going, passing camera car at 165 miles per hour.
Right.
and into the braking zone. And that was when my brain went, our brains are different, because I
Right.
did not think at all this car could go that fast to this point and then hit the brakes. And he is a championship time attack driver, so he knew it would be fine. Man, that was
Yeah.
wild.
Isn't it amazing when you know, because I mean, we've been fortunate enough to drive some really high performance stuff, some fast stuff, and have a decent amount of track time under our belts and stuff like that. Isn't it amazing when you're like, yeah, I'm okay at this. And then you drive with somebody who's at that level and you're like, I'm the worst.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I always think. Like, I'll get him with a professional driver, and I've been track driving for 25 years, 30 years, Jesus Christ. And I'm always in awe when I get out and I'm like, I'm terrible at this. I'm the like, I suck at this. And it's so humbling when you get to experience that firsthand,
Yeah.
you know? And I don't think that a lot of people realize the amount of skill, the amount of technical aptitude you have, the amount of what kind of athlete you have to be at that level, like a Lee Keen or a Dye or somebody like that, or above that. I mean, I always think it's amazing.
I completely agree. There's a smoothness to the pros I've ridden with that always surprises me. I always like to watch their feet if I can, if I'm sitting right seat, and see where they apply throttle and brake and how. And you know, it's like, it feels violent at first, like when they jump on the brakes really hard or they jump on the gas really hard. But then when you try to mimic them, like in your own car, you realize that they're not just jamming on the brakes. There's a certain way they're adding that pressure that is so fast and strong, but also there's a lot of method behind it. It's not just kicking the brake pedal.
Right.
Stuff like that. I remember I got to, so I produced a show called Proving Grounds on NBC Sports, and this was with Lee Keen, Sam Smith, Parker Kligerman, and I didn't know who Parker was when he first came on the show. And I will admit, I was like jealous that he was doing this job. And I was like, well, you know, is this guy just gonna like drive and talk about cars? Like, I can do that. Right. And I now I'm like good friends with Parker. I love him, and I really am rooting for him in NASCAR next year. And then I rode with him in a Flying Miata V8 swapped NA Miata. That was a really nicely done car. And just seeing how light his hands were on the wheel, how quick he went through the whole track, and how precise and gentle he was while we went so fast. I was like, I can't do that. Like, I can go quicker than most people, like in the public, but race car drivers have obviously decades of experience and skill. And when they put it all together, yeah, you're totally humbled. It's incredible.
Yeah. Let me ask you, I mean, because in recent times, you've driven a lot of really high performance stuff, really modern stuff, Porsches and Ferraris and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we come from, at least I do, and you kind of do too, that last generation where analog was really a thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? And like you said, you grew up driving hot rods, right? So you know what it's like to drive a car with no power brakes, with no power steering, with no anti-lock brakes, with leaf springs, with things like that, right? So now you have all this technology that's inundated in these cars, whether it's a super high performance car, even your kind of daily driver that you have. Do you miss that analog feel, or do you just look at cars differently now and say, okay, well, this is what an automobile is, this is what a performance car is, and as opposed to trying to say one was better than the other, are you more inclined to just adapt and say, okay, this is how I have to drive this car now? And do you still feel a somewhat of a kinship with the newer stuff that you do to the old, or vice versa?
I think I've just, accepted that the times are the times. So I think driving a new car that has a dual clutch transmission, and a very modern powertrain, and complaining that it doesn't feel, like a manual transmission, it's like, well, if you look around, 90% of the sports cars made today have dual clutch transmissions. So you have to just go, okay, well, I'm going to assess this against its current competition. And by the way, like, there are some manual transmissions that are not fun to shift and don't feel good.
Sure.
They feel loose. The feedback isn't great from, between the gears. Like, some of them are, it's just like, I don't know. I mean, you could say that, like bad fried chicken is not better than really good Italian food, even if you grew up eating fried chicken and thinking like that's the best food in the world. So I think I've just tried to compartmentalize those things and accept that, we can try to have both right now. We're fortunate where we can buy a used car with good analog inputs, or maybe some new cars, although they're fewer and fewer available. And then when you drive a new car, you have to assess the systems it has against its peers and compare, how is this dual clutch against the best one? How are these brakes against the best one? So we just drove the new Civic Type R, and manual transmission is great in that. Steering's just okay. And then Honda has started using this new braking system that they debuted on the NSX, and the Civic has it too, where you're pressing a brake pedal and that is pressing a switch, which is then activating electric motor that is pressing the master cylinder, which is controlling the
lot
brakes.
going on.
A lot going on. And their goal with it is to make your pedal always feel the same. So even if brake fade starts to happen or the fluid starts to heat up, you don't suddenly get this mushy pedal, and the computer will add the amount of force needed to keep your braking distance, consistent, which, okay, sounds great. I'm looking forward to being able to test that someday to see what happens when brake fade happens. Like, as we lose braking force, do I know it through the pedal? So that's something that is, the old system, which is, it's called analog power assisted brakes. When you start to lose braking force, you're very aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
With this, I don't know. So that's something where I would try to join those two worlds in my head together, because it's a new technology taking over for an old system. Is it actually better? So, but when it comes to I had so much more fun driving these, back in the day, driving a car with a manual transmission and manual steering. A lot of that is just the shine of memory. And actually, I'll try to keep this very concise, but I wrote an article for Road and Track comparing analog cars to digital cars. And I was trying to assess, why do we like analog cars more? And so I thought it might have been something to do with nerve endings. With an analog car, we're using our hands and our feet, and maybe there's more going on. So your brain is more stimulated. So that was my theory. And I hit up this doctor. I can't remember her name right now, but maybe I'll send it to you, put it in the show notes. And she had written a book about the brain chemistry behind, joy, happiness, and everything else. And she's like, that's a very nice theory, but it's wrong. What's really going on is when Zach was younger, I just got a lot of joy from driving a car. Those cars happened to be manual transmission cars, and the neural pathways that were formed in my teenage years that are very strong because of our brain's plasticity at that age are just way stronger than the neural pathways that form now that I'm driving, dual clutch cars later. She's like, so it's literally just, whatever memory we have or whatever experience we have as a young person that's pleasurable, whether it's music or art or driving or whatever, you're always going to think that it's better than anything you've experienced when you're older, just because of the way your brain's kind of designed. So hearing that was interesting. Oh yeah, that's why for a while I thought that these old hot rods were, quote, better than something new that could turn and stop, just because I had fond memories from that time.
Right. But the fact is, you still drive those cars.
Yeah.
You still have the opportunity to drive. So what do you have more fun driving? What do you enjoy
for
more?
Me, it's it's kind of like music. It depends on what mood I'm in. So, if I can get in an old 60s muscle car or Kit Cobra or something, and if I can drive it the way I drove them in high school, which is I want to rip burnouts, I want to make noise. There's there's an attitude that those cars have that is very, 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 very hard to match with a new car. And part of it is that they're old, which has a lot of just almost an intangible quality to it. There's a style thing. The sound is huge, both literally and figuratively. And I think all of that, it makes me feel like a tough person. It makes me feel like a badass, even though I'm not. And so for me, that's okay, I'm in a certain mood for this, and I'm going to go cruise around, make some noise, and just have a smile. But if I want to go, rip through canyons or go to a road course, unless I could find a really set up pro touring car, I would probably rather be in something more modern and agile, because it's catered to that. And now I'm in a more precise mood, and I want to kind of slice and dice corners and stuff.
Okay. So what have you driven in I want to say the last 6 months, because you drive a ton of cars. What have you driven that you've been, and I want to focus just on new cars.
Mhm.
What have you driven where it's either really surprised you in a positive way or really surprised you in a disappointing way? Like, you
Hmm.
know, like what did you think was going to be great that you were like, I can't wait, I've been wanting to drive this. Oh, wait, this is a shitbox.
I
Or
thought
it didn't live up to the expectation you had.
I thought the new GT3 was too stiff for most street use, which is really a bummer because the new GT3 felt like the old GT3 RS, and the GT3 is like this legend of do
That's
everything.
right. Yeah.
You can daily it and then you can track it hard, and it's got an amazing engine. I mean, it had most of the qualities advertised,
Yeah.
but driving it, and yes, I know LA roads are kind of notoriously bad, but up in the mountains, even on roads that look smooth, that just have small little kind of waves or undulations
Mhm.
under tarmac that to most people looks flat, the car was kind of bouncing around a little bit on those. And it was just kind of disappointing. I was like, oh, I kind of wish this had a slightly softer ride that was more capable and usable everywhere, because in so
Okay.
many other ways, this car is the everything car.
Yeah.
But it was missing on it. And I know that that's the price that we have these days, where or forever, like car companies have to go faster than before. Their car has to beat the previous one. And if you need it to be faster on the Nürburgring or whatever, like a lot of times that requires you to
Oh,
make the car a little stiffer. But I just thought that was a compromise I was kind of disappointed about,
yeah.
which was weird for that car. A car that really wowed me. Uh,
It's a tough
the
question.
it is, and I'm also like, I don't want it to just be like, well, I drove this $400,000 car,
Yeah, of
and it
course.
was amazing. Like, well, it
Right.
should be. The Porsche Boxster 25th Anniversary Edition was an example of a car that had a great engine, looked really special, but it was a lot softer than the GT3, and therefore I enjoyed driving it more in
Hmm.
more environments. And it still felt quick. Like if you drove it onto a track, it would still be fine.
Yeah.
I mean, it would lean over a bit more than like an RS product, but that was like, yes, this is what I like from a really good sports car. I can just drive it really hard, pretty much anywhere, but I can also drive it around town, and I feel like I'm riding in something that's solid but a little bit compliant. And
Okay.
for the price, it was nice that a really good Porsche product wasn't $180,000 or $220,000. Like this was like
Right.
97 or something like that.
Which is still an enormous amount of money.
It is, I mean, that's a huge amount of money. I want to think of something I've driven that was on the more affordable side of things. Ford Lightning, I mean, depending what spec you get it in, like what a well executed vehicle. Just take a
Okay.
normal F-150, make it electric, but for something that already has so much usability
Yeah.
in every way. I mean, they have thought out, they know their market so well, how
Yeah.
many storage bins they need, how many plugs they want, all that stuff. And then they just make it electric and add the frunk to it, where, other electric trucks don't have that frunk. It was genius. I mean, the whole thing, I know it's not for everyone. I know it's not
Sure.
great for towing. I can hear the commenters. I recognize that. But for a product like the F-150 in general, is just so well thought out.
Yeah.
And then it's electric, so it's just a little more convenient for some people.
Yeah. I always wondered if, going back to kind of the GT3 and how you thought it was stiff and whatnot, I always wonder if the manufacturers at some point go back and say, okay, well, is it really better? Right. At what point do what they think is better is actually worse? Right. Because if you have a vehicle that is um so stiff that you can't drive it on the road, you can, but it's just uncomfortable, and you somewhat lose focus of what the original concept of that vehicle was because everything else in your lineup has progressed so far.
Mhm.
When do you say we got to pull the reins back and get back to basics? Because I feel like there's such this race to go forward and forward and have more power and more speed and better handling and blah 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 blah, that we're losing focus of what the actual drive is supposed to be for the enthusiast, right? I know when I jump in a car and I want something that's fun to drive, that is my first priority. Fun to drive. Fun to drive doesn't mean the fastest thing, the best handling thing, the whatever. It doesn't mean screens. It means when I get out, I'm like, that was a freaking blast. right?
Mhm.
And so many new cars that I've driven have not delivered on that. And I'm having a real kind of problem with this because every car that I've driven in the last, I don't know, year or so has been so overly complicated as opposed to just getting back to the fun of driving.
Well, I think, um, I mean, there's a couple of problems. Like, I think the OEMs are just, they're stuck in a situation that is really challenging. A lot of people that buy cars, especially at the higher end, they need to see a number and they go, okay, well, the last one had 400 horsepower.
Of course.
The new one
Sure.
needs 440. Because if you said, well, the new one has 400 also, they might, a lot of people just go, well, it has less or the
Right.
same. So why would I trade it? Or the competition is providing more. A lot of people buy cars like that. So I think people like you and I who get to drive so many things, and I think there's a lot of enthusiasts out there too that are coming around on the power is not the final answer. More grip isn't the final answer. But it's really hard for a car company to say, okay, we're going to join your movement and stop the kind of arms race of grip and Nürburgring times and everything else, because so many people just need to see a quantifiable superiority. What's nice is, you know, companies like Lotus, the Evora is a soft compared to like a Boxster, especially like a Boxster GT4 or like the Spider. It leans over a lot more and it is much more softly sprung, and that's a huge reason I love that car. I mean, it rides great around everywhere, and then on the track it talks to you, it leans a bit, but it doesn't feel like it's out of sorts doing it. It's almost like, you know, the new Miata leans over a lot, but it's still very communicative. And when I was filming that show with Dai, he drove around the track. He'd never driven an Evora, and he was like, why is it so soft but also so good? He was really confused, but he liked it a lot. So that's like an example of a company who I think Lotus goes, well, our market's small, they tend to be focused on driving, they'll get it, whereas the general population that just needs to go fast or wants to tell people they can go fast, they don't get it. A car that's fun, I wanted to go back to something that's less expensive, like the Hyundai products, the N line.
Oh, sure.
The Elantra N,
they're great. Fantastic.
Is amazing, quick, rides more comfortably than the Civic Type R. And then the Veloster N, like, I'm a huge fan. I didn't get the 3-door thing in the beginning, but when I pick up friends, they always get in on the right side anyway. And it's way better looking than the Elantra N. Basically the same powertrain, similar performance. I mean, that's like a good, fun car that is 35 grand, something like that.
Yeah, it's not that bad.
Yeah.
So do you find that you still get as much enjoyment out of driving something like that you do as driving a higher end car? Or is it a different kind of enjoyment? Is it a different type of enjoyment to be like, oh my God, this does this for 35 grand, as opposed to getting into a GT3, which is like, well, it should do this for 190 grand.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I think I'm like proud, not that I have any reason to be proud of a company because they do all the work, but I think it's nice when there's something that's really great and fun, because the expensive cars just, they win Instagram. It's what everyone kind of aspires to own or see. People seem to get, I mean, they tend to do a lot more press. Like, you know, there's more versions of a 911 available than there will ever be versions of an 86. Like, you can get one Toyota 86, but 911, there's like 15 different versions. So we see them a lot more. And yeah, it should be that good for $200,000. And that's why when the competition is not as good, it's easy to be critical of it. But man, when something is, you know, in my price bracket and it's down there in the 30s, and it's like, hey, so many, I think what it is like so many of the people in the car world could probably experience this and get to drive it, and they're not being shortchanged, you know, because not everyone's going to get to own a $200,000 whatever, but for a lot, it's just a lot more available to people, and it's, you know, just as fun. Especially, I'm sure we talked about this before, like slow cars fast. Like, why do so many racing drivers or wealthy people like racing Miatas? Like, they're really fun, because to go back to the brain chemistry thing, you know, the speed is exciting, acceleration is exciting, but at a certain point your brain gets used to that. But you can always figure out how to turn better, how to brake better, how to shift better. And it's like when you're racing or just driving something at the limit, like you are aware you're at the limit, and it's still going to be a really good time for most people.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think when you're doing something or driving something like Miata or something along those lines, you can find the limit of that car. Where when you're driving something like a GT3, the limit is set so high, that bar is so high that unless you're a professional driver, odds are you're not going to find the limit. And most times, if you try to find that limit, it's going to bite you in the ass because you're just not skilled enough. You're not going to outdrive that car, unless you're really a professional hot shoe, right?
Yeah.
So, well, how's everything going with your M3, your E46? Are you still enjoying that car?
Right now, it's in perfect-ish working order, I would like to state.
Okay. Because you went from a Crown Vic to an E46.
Yeah, I did.
Like that's a jump.
It's a big jump. I mean, I think I saved for 2 years because I was also shopping for 2 years, and you helped me a lot with this. But for the quick story for people, I started out wanting a 240SX because I'd done some drifting classes, and this was right when the 240SX price bubble was happening. Right. So a clean one was $8,000, but they have no horsepower. Then I realized that, okay, I could get an E36 for that money with 100 more horsepower. And that bubble began, and people were selling clean E36s for near 10. And at the time, no one cared about the 46, and they were starting at like 11. And crazy. So you get a car that's made better, 100 more horsepower again. And the interior on the E36 is, they fall apart a lot. Like there's a glue issue, all these other things. So, so that's why I jumped up to the 46. And I'm really glad I did, because I do feel like it's a car I can live with for a long time. And I still like it. I really still like it. I feel like I'm not done doing things with it. I have
that's cool.
Like dreams for this. I want to, track it. I want to drive it in the snow on snow tires. Like I need to do a road trip in it. I think I'm done drifting it because that's been a little hard on it.
That beats it up.
Yeah. My mechanic, he's like, yeah, you might want to skip that. He's like, that's really, he's like, you should track it, but drifting's really hard on the car.
Yeah.
But I've just done a lot of cool stuff with it. And I love the size. I think it still looks really good. It's got a timeless shape to it. It's got enough room inside. I mean, it gets 29 miles per gallon highway if it's flat and the temperature's like below 80 degrees, which I've checked multiple times. That blows my mind. And it's totally fast enough. It's a pretty quick car.
What was it? 340 horsepower?
Yeah, 333. Like yeah.
Like that's potent. Even by today's standards, that's pretty potent.
Yeah.
Right.
It's the only thing I think it's comparable to like a new 86 in terms of size, usability, etc. It's a 2+2 car, all those things, but it still has 100 horsepower on the 86. The only thing I don't like about it is that it breaks all the time and stuff falls off of it, and it costs me a bunch of money every year. Like, my girlfriend, now fiance, like she makes fun of me, and she's right to do so. She's like, this is your biggest vice of the year. Like I don't go to bars much. I don't spend money on things. And thank God I don't, because I have a very high maintenance child in the form of a BMW. So it's annoying that I still like it so much, because I could probably save myself a bunch of cash if I was like, I think it's time to move on to I don't know, a Miata or something new or whatever. But
yeah, but then there's something inherently fun about doing something and having so much fun with a car that you've always wanted, right? And then listen, I did it with my Charger, right? My 68 Charger. God knows I beat the hell out of that thing for almost 20 years. And it shows. Like I'm redoing it right now. And when I tell you I am into it for a ton of money, I was already into it for an enormous amount of money.
Yeah.
But add another 25, 30 grand on top of that. And you're like, wow, this is, and I haven't even done anything to the body yet. And I'm like,
geez,
ooh, this hurts. But I still love it. I still absolutely adore that car. And I always look at it and I go, I guess I wouldn't do it any other way, because then I wouldn't have the experiences that I've had in that car. So for you drifting the E46, like not a lot of people can say that and say that they still have the car and then can keep it updated to say, well, now I'm going to enter the next phase of its life and I want to do this with it and get more. Like you just said, you just rattled up. I want to road course it. I want to road trip it. I want to drive it on snow tires in the snow. Like you are clearly not done enjoying this car
Yeah.
and fulfilling the ideals that you had, which is, I think, is fantastic. I think it's great.
I mean, I put 50,000 miles on it since I bought it. And I think this will be funny, but like when I sold the Crown Vic, there were things I wanted to do with it, but didn't, because it was like my only car. I mean, I was like, I should have lifted this and done all this silly off-road stuff, which I ended up doing a version
To
of
others, yeah.
on our eBay show on TST. But yeah, I came out of it with like some regrets that I didn't do other stuff with it. And so I don't want to have that with this car. It's funny because the Crown Vic's a lot cheaper to maintain and etc. But you know, if I'm able to, I would like to keep it for a number of more years, or you know, longer than that, because like you said, having the memories is far more interesting. And I have friends that they like to switch up cars a lot. Like Vin Anatra from Hoonigan is a good example. He goes through cars a lot, but it's because he wants to have, you know, the variety is the spice of life experience. Like he's like, oh, I want to know what it's like to own an Evo and then a 46 and a 92. And like, I do too, but I don't, for me, it's like, I want to complete this story in my head before I go to the next story. Because in the past, I've done a lot of switching and I've gone, oh, I wish I still had that to do this thing.
Right.
So,
no, that's good. I think that's a great thing for everybody out there to actually listen to, because I think so many times people don't do that. Right. They haven't done the road trip that they wanted to do, or they haven't done the racetrack that they wanted to do, or they've put off that experience in search of getting something better, or what they think in their mind is a better vehicle.
right.
And I think they do that far too often, which is a real shame, as opposed to experiencing what the car could do as a total. Like once you get through, I've done drifting, I've done road tripping, I've off-roaded, I've drifted in the snow or the dirt and all that stuff. Once that is done, you could say, okay, now it's time.
Right.
But I think so many people will have those regrets, and for whatever reason, they constantly want to move on. And like you said, like Vin, if he does that, that's great. But I always want to know what things are going to do in kind of every situation to get that full experience, so that I can go back to somebody and be like, oh yeah, I did that. Or yeah, I totally did that. I can tell you I don't know what it's like to do in a Ferrari, but I can tell you what it's like to do in a 68 Charger, or you could say, I know what it's like to do.
Yeah, but your Charger,
46.
you've had such cool memories in that thing. I mean, the stuff you've done, the events you've done, the shoot, like we did shoots with it and you were ripping donuts and stuff. And I think for people like you and I, we just like a little bit of the mayhem and the fun driving and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And some people like to just own the car. I'm not interested in just saying, oh, I owned this once and then I owned this once, without saying, and then I did XYZ with it.
That's correct. And people always say, like, God forbid, you know, if anything happened to that car, people are like, would you get another one? And I go, absolutely not. And the reason is it's not that car.
Oh, interesting.
It's not. I mean, there's no reason for me to get another 68 Charger when it's just not that one.
Right.
It's just not. And I get more sentimental about vehicles than I think other people, but it's every memory that I have, or not every, but some of the best memories I have were in that specific vehicle. And
so for you, it's not about the car. It's not about it being a Charger or a muscle car. That's like, well, you could find 1,500 different muscle cars that do the same things, but it's like this one, the memories are in
it's
this
that one.
Yeah.
It's that exact one. So if God forbid something happens, there will never be another one. I will never own another one, because not that one, you know? So, well, let me ask you, dude, so what do you got coming up next? Because obviously we're going to the holidays. The year is possibly slowing down for you a little bit.
Yeah, we have, I mean, we tend to make content on Smoking Tire through, basically up to Christmas week. And then we skip that one because the views are zero because everyone's spending time with their family, which is what they should do. But let's see, I have an 800 horsepower Supra lined up. I'm going to drive that new Supra. There's a gentleman here named Emmanuel who runs a company called New Age Performance, does really good work with Hondas. Like I've driven a couple of his Civics. Like the handling's great, everything's balanced, they're really fast. So he has a new Civic that he's gonna let me try, which is cool. And then we have a Ferrari 296 coming in. I drove the Spider. I got to go on the launch for that, but we're gonna have the coupe come in and be able to spend a little bit more time with it. That is an amazing execution of hybrid engineering. It really, really is. And then we have a list. I don't want to spill the list yet for what I'm going to drive for Autopian for Bose cars, but that gentleman has an incredibly diverse and interesting
Yeah.
collection of cars. And he's being very nice about which ones he might let us film and drive. And I am honestly blown away at how nice he is about it. I mean, he's a partner in Autopian, but still, like when we walked through that room, I went, well, these are probably off limits. He's like, actually, if we put these two in a video together, that's a really good comparison. And my brain was like, we're gonna get both of them?
But that's great,
Are
though.
you serious? Oh, it's great.
That's somebody who gets it, though.
It's amazing. Yeah.
That's
So,
very, very
I'm really
cool.
excited. That's probably going to be January or February of 2023.
Okay.
So that's kind of in the planning stage. So we got some new stuff coming up this month and some aftermarket stuff. And then next year, some weird, wacky stuff.
Good. All right. And
Yeah.
Zack, where can everybody find you if they want to see, what you're doing as far as not only writing, but videos and podcasting and everything else?
The podcast and videos are on the Smoking Tire. So Smoking Tire YouTube channel, and then the Smoking Tire podcast, which you can get on any podcast app or on YouTube itself if you like to consume podcasts that way. You can follow me at the real Zack Klapman on Instagram, or on Twitter, just Zack Klapman. So I think I'm the only real Zack Klapman out there on Instagram. So
yeah. Okay. Makes sense.
yeah.
All right, cool. Well, dude, thank you so much for taking the time to come on. It's always great to hang out for a while and just bullshit. Looking forward to seeing what you're doing for the rest of the year and into 2023. And when I come down and pick up the Charger down in Palm Desert, I'll stop by and maybe you could throw it up and you can take it for a test drive, because I don't think
Yes.
I don't think you've ever driven that car.
Hey, you don't think I have? I think I moved it once for you. Really, I really think that was the case. I moved it very gingerly, but I don't think I've ever driven it. But I would absolutely love to. That would be an honor.
Yeah, I think that'd be fun. Take it for a proper shakedown and test drive. I think you'll get a kick out of it.
I'll let you do the break-in miles first. Make sure everything's going to stay on the car.
It's fine. It's fine. It's always been fine, kind of,
All right.
sometimes.
Sign this waiver, please.
All right, buddy. Well, listen, enjoy the holidays. Again, thank you for coming on. And everybody, obviously, if you're looking for that car or truck or any classic vehicle, go to Hemmings.com, check out our auctions. We'll help you find one. But otherwise, Zack, always a pleasure, my friend.
You're one of my favorite people. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.
All right, brother. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks for listening, folks. And again, please subscribe to the Hot Rod Barbecue podcast. If you're on Spotify, check us out there. Subscribe to it on iTunes. And if you are going to go to YouTube, make sure you go to the Hot Rod Barbecue podcast and hit that subscribe button, and we'll come to you every week.